How's it going, everyone? It's your man, Lost Disciple, the voice box of the underground of YouTube. And the other week, I think it was, I came across some very surprising, but honestly not that surprising news given the current gaming climate in terms of just how shady developers are acting nowadays. I'm not sure if it's true or not. I didn't really go try to fact check it, but apparently either Microsoft, because Microsoft owns Activision and Blizzard now. Someone up there in that office. Apparently, they're laying off the developers of Call of Duty. I'm not sure, or they're just making AI the actual developers. I guess the studios that were working on it, I'm pretty sure, which was Infinity Ward, Treyarch, and Sledgehammer, I'm sure are the ones that still do it. I guess they're either no longer going to be developing the CODs themselves, and AI is going to just be taking the whole thing over, or they're just going to be developing the gameplay mechanics or whatever. And in terms of just storyboard for, I guess, the campaigns or something, AI is just going to be running the whole show over there. Like I said, I didn't really get too much details on that specifically. I just kind of seen it, and I was just I just gave it a couple seconds of my time, and I was just went on to the next thing, because I don't really play Call of Duty anymore. I stopped playing it consistently maybe back when BO4 came out. That was probably the last Call of Duty that really caught my attention, and that kind of reignited that thrill of playing COD again. I'm an older player. I played MW, original MW2, MW3, BO2. I played a little bit of Modern Warfare 1, but Modern Warfare 2 is really kind of where I got my feet wet. And it's honestly, it's sad. It really is. I'm not surprised, honestly. I wouldn't say I've seen AI taking over from a mile away. However, when microtransactions and game passes became more prevalent in COD, especially when they started, doing the whole blackout Fortnite Battle Royale thing, I kind of knew it was going downhill from there. The signs were pretty prevalent and obvious. And Call of Duty just wasn't really feeling the same then. I'm not sure if it was because I was getting older, graduating high school, working more, but it didn't really, honestly, just didn't really have that same soul to it anymore. And now it just really won't have any soul, considering that developers will be overshadowed by AI if this is true, and depending on how far they want to go with this. And it kind of just reminded me what Call of Duty used to be. I was listening to music the other day, right? This is what really did it. I was listening to Not Ready to Die by Avenged Sevenfold. And, if you know anything about that song, that song was made for zombies. It was made by the band Avenged Sevenfold for the Call of the Dead map as the map's Easter egg song. And it just kind of brought me back when I was damn, if it wasn't for Call of Duty, I don't think I would have ever discovered Avenged Sevenfold. And that's one of my favorite bands. I love their music. And it just, from there, it kind of opened the whole thought. It was damn, back then, Call of Duty was the shit. Not in terms of just, because everybody played it, but they really cared back then. Nowadays, you don't really, do they even do that with, not even just with Avenged Sevenfold. I know that they, only reason why they made music was because M Shadows played Call of Duty video games. So I don't know how him and Treyarch worked together. Maybe, through, how big offices are owned, maybe Universal or whoever they're signed with, or Warner Bros, dibble dabbled in, was able to make the connection. I don't know. However, they made it happen, and they made magic. And, they made something that impacted and really defined generations worth of thoughts of what Call of Duty is. And it just showed it was just the care that they put into it, and it went further than that. They also made the I believe the BO2 the multiplayer sound effects for when you leveled up or leveled your gun up or did a challenge, that quick rock effect. Avenged Sevenfold made all that, and they also made a lot of music for a lot of Treyarch based Call of Duty games, which something we'll get into later. But they made a lot of things for Call of Duty, and it was just interesting that developers Treyarch specifically, but a lot of the developers for Call of Duty back then kind of really was involved with the community. Even when the microtransactions became more of a thing. There was the time when you bought COD, you got what was supposed to be with the game. That was It was like that with a lot of games back then. When you bought the game, you got everything included with the game, and if there were unlockables, you were able to unlock them with some sort of in-game currency or some sort of challenge or unlockable in-game. I remember back when they first started like really introducing the idea of skins, and that was in Black Ops 2. But back then, it kind of worked. You know, it's weird when you really think about it, because I don't remember really complaining about that stuff back then, because it wasn't like it didn't feel like it made the game, or it didn't feel like you really needed to buy it. You know, this, especially the skins, a lot of the skins and DLC. Well, the DLC was always felt like, you know, you needed the DLC depending on the game, especially if you were playing like the Treyarch Call of Duties. I always bought the DLC. I found myself buying more DLC for the Treyarch CODs than I did the Infinity Ward CODs. That's just because Treyarch really was the shit back then. But you know, you didn't really feel the pressure of having to buy the DLCs or the real DLCs, which were like the weapon skins and stuff like that back then. It was just something that if you wanted it, you could get it. And it added a couple extra things like the reticle sights, and you know, I think there weren't like little badges and stuff like that. I think it also had like title cards and stuff like that with them. So it was just something a little cool that you could have, just an accessory. If you have a couple extra bucks, you can, or Microsoft points or whatever, you can go and buy those things. It was honestly, it was really, really, really nice. There were, you know, other game modes that they also added with it. That's what I'm saying. Like, they started really small. Like, if you remember back when they dropped the Chaos mode, I think it was called, back in the original Modern Warfare 3, you know, that was pretty cool. You know, it was just a little game mode. Yeah, it didn't come out with the game, but it wasn't something that you needed to buy if you didn't want it. It wasn't something like a critical game mode, like, oh man, I really want to play that. It was just like, it was a subtle little drop. You know, they were still exploring with the idea of it. And at that time, honestly, it wasn't that bad because the base game was still jam-packed full of content. So if you wanted anything extra outside of that, you know, it was your call whether or not you really wanted to spend that money. Nowadays, you know, COD is just filled with microtransactions to the brim. You could probably literally outrank with all the microtransactions, all the different previous DLCs and their content and their microtransactions, and probably have a list that overshadows it with all the shit that's jam-packed into Call of Duty now. I can't even think about it. I remember like the first like celebrity idea of COD was back when Snoop Dogg was introducing COD Ghosts. And man, but really, like, they just, back then, the developers just really went the extra mile when they were making these games. You know, they were really involved with the community. They listened, they were active. Like, the only thing I was thinking about too, like, I don't even know if nowadays if anyone is really aware about it or that relationship is still there. Like, do you guys remember like really being involved with the developers? Like, at least, like, that's what I'm saying. It goes back, for some reason, a lot of this goes back to Treyarch. Like, David Vonderhaar, I remember seeing memes of this guy, like, all over Twitter and, like, the internet and YouTube back when I was growing up watching YouTube videos on Call of Duty and shit like that. And, like, just him really being involved with the community. Then Jason Blundell, the dude that ran Zombies, like, he was definitely always involved, you know, teasing stuff out, leaks, talking about the stories, where Zombies was gonna go. Those two guys, at least, I remember always hearing something about them, at least when the Call of Duty was involved. Their names were always somewhere around. Even if there wasn't their game, like, for that year. Like, if we were playing fucking Modern Warfare 3, we're talking about what the next Call of Duty Black Ops 2 is about to be. Even up until Call of Duty Ghosts, I'm not lying. Everybody cared about those two guys, like, solidified. And there was other dude, I think his name was Mark or something, the light-skinned guy. He was pretty cool, but a lot of people really fucked with David Vonderhaar and Jason Blundell. Like, we had a bond with developers back then. Like I'm saying, there was more soul in that era of Call of Duty back then. There's one song, right, that I think every gamer from, I'd say 2011 to 2013, that, because I'm by then everybody that was playing video games played Call of Duty. There's one song that when we hear it, that will literally unite. Okay. Do you guys remember, like, anyone else get, like, the chills when they hear that? Like, just thinking about, like, even just the memories that come flooding in when you hear that. I know it's some really deep shit. Like, the campaigns, don't even get me started on how solid the campaigns were. The campaigns were amazing. The original Modern Warfare trilogy was just amazing. Makarov, the build-up, seeing General Shepard betray the boys, it was honestly just perfect. And like the little museum thing at the end of Modern Warfare 2 to just kind of like have slight recalls on just the overall story and what had happened. It was a nice little ad. And then the Black Ops series from World at War all the way up to BO4, realistically, it was just something amazing. It really was. And like you could tell that it really, really impacted it because of look at what they really kind of tried to have, like look at what they really base Call of Duty off of today. It was what they perfected back then with no new formula. If anything, they tried to take what they made back then, which was perfect, and mix this new cliche, shady, money grab shit into the games to try to feed off nostalgia and make that extra coin at the same time. It's really not the same when compared to back then. The campaigns were perfect. Not the zombies modes, the alternate modes that they included with the games were actually well thought out with really solid gameplay mechanics. You know, nowadays I feel like the zombies is just it just doesn't have, it lost its identity. And it was, I kind of seen it coming when BO4 Zombies really said like zombies lost its identity. Like BO3 Zombies was the perfect rendition of zombies I think of. You know, if you didn't like the gobblegums, you didn't have to use them, and it didn't really feel like it changed that much of the game. BO4 Zombies was just like, okay, you knew it was really, really, like by then Call of Duty was already going downhill, but that's how you kind of knew like the only thing that really carried Call of Duty for a lot of nostalgic players at least was the zombies. It was just done. You know, it lost its identity. And if you look at it now, I haven't even played it, but apparently it's supposed to be like an objective-based type of zombies that's more inspired off of like Warzone, which is cool, but it's just not my forte. I personally think that if they would have stayed with the formula that they created with Black Ops 3 and just ran with that a little bit longer, they would at least been able to pocket some more coin from the nostalgic players, because zombies really carried it after, you know, the multiplayer and everything else kind of went downhill from there. And like the zombies back then just had more oomph, you know. The mechanics are solid, even besides Black Ops 3 Zombies, right? You know, the mechanics were solid, the gameplay was amazing, not to mention all the Easter egg music. You know, that Kevin Sherwood guy, Maluka, and I can't remember the other two, but they're important as well. You know, they just, man, they crafted something that is just, it's always gonna be a gem on the internet. Honestly, it's always going to be a gem whenever you pop in that Black Ops 2 or that World at War or any Call of Duty, and just feel the energy and the time and the effort and the real care and thought that they put out into the role that they had into making those games. It was just something different back then. The community was more united. We had esports, which is at like its peak highest like popularity, you know, 2016, 2017. The development cycle was solid, even when they introduced Sledgehammer into the mix. Like, something about, I don't know if it was just the graphics, just the era back then, but it was perfect. You know, like the games looked good, the stories were good, everything was good. So even with that 1 year, you know how it is now, every year a new COD comes out, but when it was just Treyarch and fucking Infinity Ward making it, it was solid. You know, it seems like they had enough time to really get things done where they needed to get done and have a quality product just waiting to be released, on top of already, it seemed like, planned DLCs that they had time to, instead of just trying to rush everything in or rush everything out like how they do now. And, you know, it shined, like the solid mechanics and like the core gameplay concepts, it shined through its declination era, right? Even when they, you know, other developers started experimenting with, you know, having their own version of zombies, right? You know, Zombies in Spaceland, the fucking World War II zombies, Exo Zombies, right? They all tried to stay with, okay, look, you know, Treyarch had this formula going, let's run with that, you know, they try to work with that. And then when Infinity Ward had their survival mode in Spec Ops, you know, they try to stick with that. They had solid foundational mechanics for their different game modes that worked, you know. They were experimental to the point where it didn't completely ruin it, and if you didn't like it, then you didn't have to play it. Like, I wasn't a big fan of Exo Zombies back then, so I didn't really buy into it, but I had a buddy that bought him all the DLC maps for Exo Zombies, and I remember going to his house and playing them and having a blast. But it wasn't something that I really wanted to do back when I played Advanced Warfare, so I didn't buy Exo Zombies. But when I did play it, I had fun, but it just wasn't my thing. Same thing with Zombies in Spaceland, right? I didn't buy the DLCs for it, but when I did play Zombies in Spaceland, when I found myself playing Infinite Warfare, I enjoyed it. It was really fun, and I do remember it being exactly, if not probably the closest thing to a if you can call it a clone, of the Treyarch rendition of Zombies, right? And it was really fun. And like you could tell that whatever, like the foundation and the system that they had from 2011 or 2010, to 2013, they really stuck with that, and they try to have that carry. But then now they're mixing it with all these cliches that I was talking about, that it honestly just doesn't really feel the same anymore. And like I said, if they're really going to cut back on the developers and have everything developed by AI, it's really not going to be the same anymore. And like I mentioned before, like I know I kept bringing up Treyarch, and when you really think about it, right, over that golden era of Call of Duty, it was really Treyarch that kind of carried COD and paved the way for what many of us think of when we think of Call of Duty and when we look back on Call of Duty. When you really, really, really think about it, I mean, Infinity Ward and Sledgehammer, for the time that they had a chance to shine, they did really good jobs. Don't get me wrong, Modern Warfare 2 was fucking amazing, right? I remember, literally, I was listening to some dubstep back in the day at work, right? And I was just thinking, like, yo, I remember listening to dubstep back then. And this was me and my friend Ryan, shout out Ryan. This was our go-off music, right? We would be playing fucking In For The Kill by Skrillex and LaRue, I think it was. Playing a whole bunch of Skrillex, Scary Monsters, Nice Sprites, a little bit of Deadmau5, some chords, more Ghosts and stuff. Like, I remember playing mad dubstep listening to Modern Warfare 2, right? And Infinity Ward and Modern Warfare 3, they did a really good job. Sledgehammer, I don't really remember. Oh, Advanced Warfare was decent, and everything else kind of sucked. But they did a good job. But when you really, really think back on Call of Duty, everybody always thinks of the things that Treyarch did. It was Treyarch that really carried and was like, yo, this is what Call of Duty is going to be. And they kind of like took, because I believe it was Infinity Ward that started it. So they took what Infinity Ward had as its foundation, right? And they just polished the shit out of it. And honestly, from when they did that, every other, Call of Duty that came out after that golden era really just tried to copy that heart and soul that the other CODs of that time of the golden era really had. And it was because of things that Treyarch did, like work with talented musicians like Avenged Sevenfold and Kevin Sherwood, and other musicians that I can't think of their names because I'm just spouting this at the top of my head. Going the extra length to have developers that were involved with the community, whether it was just on Twitter, the interviews and stuff like that. They really broke their necks to make Call of Duty good for us. And, when they left, you can kind of tell that soul left with them. And it's insane to say it, but like when you really think back on it, it's true. At least I know going forward, I've been stopped playing Call of Duty seriously. And when I do play, it's very rare, and it's never really anything serious, especially none of the new ones, right? I'll go back and play some Black Ops 3 or BO4 or Modern Warfare 2 if I really want to, but I really just found myself going back to play BO3 Zombies. But anyway, I just hope that it's kind of like a message going forward for anyone that's really thinking that anything's going to change, especially nowadays. You guys got to remember, especially with how gaming is now, if they're really going to rely on this AI slop. Like, I know this is about Call of Duty, but if any of you ever seen like the 2K series and how cash grabby that is, and the new cover, yes, this is their new covers. I thought this shit was fake too. It's just obvious AI slop, right? So if you pair that with, fucking crazy amounts of microtransactions, right? Battle passes, and now AI unhearted, no soul, soulless, thoughtless crap, just brain rot, just being spewed out into these types of games being developed. There's really no going back. And there already was no going back. So there's no point in really hoping and carrying that hope that something's going to be different. You got to remember, right? The idea is that you will own nothing and be happy. But the idea is that you won't even know that you're not owning anything. So that's how you're going to be happy. But that's a whole different topic for another video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. This is probably not going to be something common. I just was really thinking about it because, like I said, I was listening to some Avenged Sevenfold at work, and it really just had me thinking just back on the days where I don't know if life was easier then because I was just only in school and that's what, defined it, or if from the things that I said really made Call of Duty what it was. And I honestly think it was that, the easy childhood paired with the care and thought and actual effort put into Call of Duty that really made it where when I look back at the Call of Duties of then and what Call of Duty used to be, It really, 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 really was the shit. Other than that, I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.